Top of the morning. This is your brother Abdul Hafid Muhammad bin Abdullah. And we just want to wish everybody good vibes and lots of blessings and peace. So as we think about violence, one simple point we want to make today is that violence comes from the same place, originates from the same place, but it expresses itself in many different ways, right? Violence is a pathology. Violence is a mindset. It's a state of the heart. It's something that happens within you that allows you to behave a certain type of way, right? Gives yourself permission to cause harm to another person. And sometimes violence could be considered justified, but oftentimes what we're witnessing around the world, we're witnessing inside our communities, is that there's this unjustified violence, harm, and oppression that's being inflicted upon people. So when you're thinking about violence having a singular origin, right? That being that which is negotiating between the heart and the mind. When the heart has an intention and the mind gives itself permission to execute the heart's intention, and it acts itself out in terms of our limbs and our behaviors with other people, right? And it does it in many ways, right? It's harm inflicted upon children, harm inflicted upon women, harm inflicted upon men, harm inflicted with instruments like guns, knives, harm inflicted with ideas, right? Harm inflicted with pens and policies, right? So again, those are variations where you can categorize those into two categories: structural and interpersonal violence. In any case, many of the drivers, right, and the social and structural dynamics, right, they have a common, right, relationship to each other, which is the reason why in our work we look to build ecosystems, right, and to strengthen ecosystems, specifically community-based ecosystems, to be able to interface with and interact with other aspects of the larger ecosystem, in order to be able to then negotiate positive outcomes as it relates to countering, right, the ecosystem of violence, right? Because violence also, like an invasive species, right? Something could come in and actually take over your ecosystem and inhibit the growth of your ecosystem. Violence, poverty, right, and other forms of social insecurities, that's what it does. So when you think about violence, what I want to share with you today, I want you to first recognize that violence has a common origin, as we said earlier, the heart and the mind of the human being, that acts out through the limbs of the human being in multiple different types of ways. So when we look at multiple forms of violence, so I want to say is you can't think about violence without looking at multiple forms of violence, because also the conditions in which allows for those multiple forms of violence to manifest themselves from the heart and the mind of a human being, they're similar to each other. They're called shared risk and protective factors, right? And if you understand the science of shared risk and protective factors and how to negotiate and how to navigate, right, and how to be a social engineer of the risk and protective factors, then you begin to understand the science of building an ecosystem that counters the propelling ecosystem, the evolving ecosystem of violence and social insecurity, right? You have to understand that science, and within the program or the implementation of CPrV, a community-based public health response to violence, right? This is what we advance. This is what we lead as it relates to prevention of structural and interpersonal violence.